Hello, Calling Up Justice community. This is Claudia Alec with an urgent message, a complicated story, and hopefully some steps towards transformative justice. I have a little bit of a sore throat today, so if I have to take a pause to drink water or drink tea, I will. In 2018, there was a mass shooting at the Tree of Life synagogue, where an anti-Semitic act of extreme white nationalist violence. And in that same week, another two black people. How many black people get killed by white nationalist violence, white supremacy culture in this country? So in that week, two were killed by a gunman at the Kroger grocery store. And then at that same week, 13 pipe bombs sent to Democrats, Trump critics. Again, this was all white nationalist terrorism. And I went online, as I'm wont to do. I do this about 2, 3 times, 4 times a year. Said, hey, let's make a big national art noise about this. And I was contacted by Amanda Browder. Amanda Browder and I went to high school together. She is a white woman, and we went to high school together in Missoula, Montana, which is a place that taught me a lot about white supremacy culture. Now, we weren't close friends in high school, but we both grew to be professional artists based in New York and have been colleagues as adults. So when she reached out, I was like, oh, this feels exciting. I already have connections to commissioning quilts to come along with social justice projects that I've produced. I co-created fiber art objects with folks. That was through knitting. And also I have a practice for the last 20 years of creating art objects that are created from tiny little pieces contributed from a lot of different people. So that's manifested as like a poem written by 300 people, or people creating these visual hearts and then holding them up in the air, and then a drone taking a photo of that gigantic group of people holding their hearts for justice up. So this felt like a really beautiful fit. And she said, let's cover a building with a quilt. And I said, well, you know what? Let's turn up the vision a notch. What if? And so this is what we created together. We co-created this. A vision of quilt panels being sewn in every single state across the country. And then all of those quilt panels come together to create a quilt. So usually Amanda Browder's exercise was, she has the way she makes her quilts, she'll go to a community and a small group or institution will come together and there'll be community volunteers to help to create this gigantic art object. In this vision, it was a lot less work for all the individuals, but they were spread out all over the country. So it did add the additional complications of arranging sewing circles in every single state and also shipping all of that fabric to New York to sew it together into one thing. And then the idea was we would present a piece of it, Washington, D.C., hang it somewhere, maybe guerrilla style, try to hang it on the Washington, on the White House. I don't know. No, we'd never do that. But to present it in Washington, D.C., and then at that point, finish completing the full quilt and then touring it back to the communities so they would have an opportunity to do a performance, a public performance, along with this big, gigantic quilt with the words justice on it. Amanda, her aesthetics are ones where she doesn't put language on her quilts, but for this one, we were going to have justice writ large. And the other vision was to add story circles to this so that people were sharing real stories of justice. And then that culminating event was an invitation for the entire community to create a variety show that helped remind them what was important in their community around justice. And so that was the vision. We'd also added a section on having collagers so that if you were physically unable to sew, you could also, and that's either by remote distance, because I was thinking of, how do we capture as many participants as possible? So you could do a collage. So if you could not get to the space to sew with us, you could make a collage, and that could also be a part of the practice. And also, we might have children who might just want to collage in the space. Also, you love the collage. All right. So in a year and some change, we first gathered and created through decolonized process. So decentering capitalism, there's no money involved, and we're just getting together to come up with, this is the frame, these are the agreements, this is what we're doing. We then brought on an advisory board. We worked with an advisory board for a while, and then we realized we actually wanted a working board, and also that was a board that didn't have to manifest for a while. So we built our website. We designed beta tests of the story circles and the sewing circles. I produced digital story circles. We had a bunch of film. I edited together like a little promo for us. We had somebody else working on a larger documentary about the entire project. And these were the three values that we came up with in this decolonized process. And it's important for me to state these out loud in this recording. The first value was we decenter money. Funding is not something that we have to have. This project will happen with or without funding. Also, this project is not about making personal profit for Claudia or personal profit for Amanda. We're not trying to get rich off the Justice Quilt. We recognize the Justice Quilt will exist. And if funding doesn't manifest, something will manifest that is the Justice Quilt. So there was a recognition from the beginning of the process that we were designing something to happen, and that we would and we had an expansive vision, obviously, because, you know, let's try and do the entire thing, but we could do a piece of that and still be, this has been a good accomplishment. Also, yes, okay. So then the second value was this will happen with or without us. So, and this was in here mostly because of me, actually. That's what I thought. If one of us had to step away from the project could continue. I was thinking if I have health issues, Amanda should be empowered to keep the project going because we want the project to happen. But also, frankly, it was about so it was about the project. The project continues with or without us. The third piece was we invest in the project stays with the project. So in the unlikely but possible outcome of Claudia having to step away because of health issues, I was not going to say, you're not allowed to do a project that has the word justice on it. You're not allowed to use any of the copy I have written to describe what we are doing. You aren't allowed to manifest any of the ideas that I have created for this project and then invested into this design. I was like, I wasn't going to say, oh, you're not allowed to have any of the digital spaces I've designed. And in fact, I wasn't even, part of that agreement was I wasn't going to be able to remove the use of people using my digital spaces to produce the project, because we were producing this all on Claudia Alec transmedia producing platforms. So, or at least organizing digitally on those platforms. So those are the three main agreements that we had in place. And we had done all of the legwork to actually get ourselves to a place where you could actually, because while we were decentering capitalism, we did want to work on this not at a loss. So we were applying for funding, and we were gathering all this collateral, not only to help communicate the project to our partners in all these different states that we're going to be acting and working remotely, but also to help fundraise for the project. So that's real. One of the other things we ended up doing was we set up a intersection for the arts account. And this intersection for the arts account, I didn't realize that we tried to set it up dually, but for some reason they needed some additional kind of commitment or paperwork from Amanda. And Amanda didn't want to, be financially tied up in this stuff. And she felt safe and trusted me to hold on to this. So that's what I did. So we created this intersection for the arts account, and this was our flip cause to raise money. We barely launched this fundraiser, and then pandemic hit. So let's talk about what happened during the pandemic. So during the pandemic, she's missing meetings, but that's not a problem. It's a global pandemic. I actually end up replacing our regular weekly meeting with the producing and pandemic sessions because I recognize we're pivoting. We're recreating our schedules and our ways of working. I'm continuing to produce the story circles because turns out during a pandemic, a digital story circle is actually, and a digital story circle about justice making is actually something that people really want and really enjoy, and is something that has worth. So I was so grateful we'd already developed it, and it was something that could happen without the necessity for Amanda's continued investment, because I could tell she was busy and overwhelmed because she was trying to transition, just trying to build. She had a quilt she was building with a community group, and then she had 2 interns sewing it for her. I was like, I recognize you are busy and full, and that's our practice should be one where there's a reason why we have shared leadership. While you lack capacity, I have capacity, so let me take the ball. We're good. Then she invites me to this event at a museum where she's going to be presenting on her quilting practice. And I'm so happy, and I show up, and there's a long introduction, and it's very detailed, and it never mentions the Justice Quilt. I'm like, huh. And then there's a 40-minute presentation that Amanda does, and she never mentions the Justice Quilt, not once. And I go, in my brain at the time, I'm thinking, oh, this must be because she's disallowed to talk about other things here or something. And so at the end, I'm like, oh, I know how to help. So there's a Q&A, and I'm like, hey, this might be self-serving, but you working on anything with anyone else? Thinking, oh, what a fun way to have, and she can't talk. It's weird because we've been actually writing these long, beautiful narratives. We know that the project is an anti-terrorism project, it's an anti-racism project, that it is what it is. But we've been working on these beautiful long narratives and ways of talking about it. And she couldn't even say anti-terrorism. She couldn't say anti-racism. She struggled to talk about what the project was and why we were doing it. And then she tried to get, and then she introduced me to talk about it. And I don't remember the specific language. I just recall at the time thinking, oh no, you've just done a really insulting microaggression to me, where you feel where you're trying to compliment me and tell other people about me, but what you're doing is insulting me and misconstruing my practice and who I am in the world. So in my brain, I was like, oh, we should definitely touch base so that I can process the microaggression and make sure that we are actually really emotionally good. And also, let's talk the pivot plans for the future. I've got a couple of ideas that I've been working on. So we get on the call. I rev up to talk. I'm just like, so this is and I don't even get to finish my sentence. Now, I remember what I've been planning to share was, I've been doing a lot of national leadership. I'm on a bunch of national boards. This is all of the research that I know about COVID-19, transmission rates, all of this. This is what I believe the next best steps are. This is what the future of the project is. I don't think we're going to be able to safely gather people in shared spaces until 2022, really. So for the design of the project, we should push that. But I don't even get to say any of that. I get to go, what I've been working on, and she stops, and I don't want to mischaracterize or characterize anything that she did, right? And I recognize that I'm feeling hurt and angry, so I'm trying my best to not do that. So I'm not going to say that she yelled at me, but her voice was loud, and she didn't let me talk. She spoke fast and with a fierceness and with an energy, and she let me know that it was dumb and foolish, and there was no way that we could ever produce a quilt in Washington, D.C. in November. Therefore, there was no way we should do anything, and we should stop the project and shut it down completely. Now, what I absorbed was, oh, I think my colleague is in crisis and is having that kind of narrowed vision thing that happens when you're in crisis. And I was like, well, we don't need to worry about Washington, D.C. We're not even going to try and do that. We're already doing the story circles and the digital part of the project. But I don't even get to really finish that phrase, because she's like, fine. If you want to keep going on it, you go ahead. But I'm going to need to take my art away from that. And then I'm like, whoa. Now at that point, I do interrupt and say, no, at the top of this project, we both committed to what invested in the project stays with the project. And I make sure that we end the call with her saying, yeah, that's what we agreed to. And then the next day she sends me an email that does the most white supremacy culture thing, where she rewrites history. And in that email, she's like, I don't think that, I communicated well or that you understood me well with clarity. So let me just like restate this. Oh, and also she's like both siding it. Like, it's a stressful time for both of us. And I'm like, wow. So you're not going to acknowledge what you did and you're not going to apologize for it. And you're going to say some things in this. And what does she say? She says, she restates because it's impossible to produce a physical quilt in November in DC, the project is impossible to do completely and should be shut. So she repeats that. But then she says she doesn't want to quit. She just needs to take a break. Now, this is her changing her mind. But in the letter, she's not saying that thing I said yesterday. I'm not saying that anymore. Now I'm saying I need to take a break. She's saying I need to take a break as if that's what she'd said the day before. And it's not what she said the day before. But she says she needs to take a break, and that's fine. That's always been a part of her agreed upon stuff. But then she says she's giving us special permission to use her images, as long as we don't use them in some new future way. And then we'd have to check with her to make sure that was okay. And I looked at that and I was like, okay, so that's you 100% ignoring the exchange we had yesterday about the agreement we made at the top of this collaborative process. And then she ends the letter with, but I feel so dedicated to this project. I still believe in it. I still believe in you. I love it all. And, as soon as there's funding, I'm back. And in that moment, I'm like, oh no. So you just now changed the agreement again and made your participation contingent upon you getting paid. Oh no. And I thought to myself, wow, that's messy. We're going to have to process that. And I waited for her to reach out. And she never did. So, cut to nowish. And I need to raise money, not only for the Justice Quilt, which has not stopped and has been continuing, but all of my other justice-based projects. And I would love to be able to allow people to get a tax write-off on the We Charge Genocide TV project or the Every 28 Hours Plays project. So I let her know that I reach out to Intersection for the Arts, we figure out how to make a calling of justice thing, and what I need to do is I need to fully shut down the Intersection for the Arts one for the Justice Quilt, and reconcile any of that money. $45 is in that account. So I let her know in like a 3-sentence email, hey girl, shutting this account down, there's $45 in it, give me a call so we can do all this stuff. And instead of giving me a phone call, she sends me another long email. This is not our communications practice. This is a different practice, but this is the one she wants to do. So she sends me a long email that says, glad you're shutting this admin piece down. You should shut it all down. I'd be happy to help with that. And it feels disingenuous. It feels threatening, but threatening with a smile, like you're trying to, like, again, that's how I absorbed it. So I did let her know, hey, the project never stopped. I'm still producing this project. So if you dismantle our digital spaces, that's you harming the project. But what she does is she decides to harm the project, and she deletes all of the posts that are in the shared Instagram account. And the problem with her doing that is she deletes posts that I made. So she's deleted our shared narrative. I no longer have a digital space that shows me the shared narrative of the project that I produced. My language has been deleted. My imagery has been deleted, but she deleted the stuff that we had shared. This is one thing I found interesting. She deleted all of the posts. Again, deleting the narrative of the project. So it's as if the project didn't happen. And I'm like, why would you delete the history of the entire project? But she did accidentally, I don't think this was on purpose, she did accidentally leave our events, which do have a piece of her imagery in it. And she completely deleted the website, and she completely deleted the blog. And of course, the project's still continuing, so a bunch of my communications out in the world actually lead back to the website and the blog. And I couldn't figure it out. I asked my friend, why? Why would someone do that? Why would she do that? And my colleague said, perhaps it's because she was afraid. Maybe she thought that you were going to make money with the Justice Quilt using her imagery, and then you would cheat her from her money because you were using the Justice Quilt to make all this money. Now, I'm trying to figure out why I would do a 6-month process of building trust and real agreements for how we resolve conflict, how we figure this stuff out, why I would do all that labor if I was the kind of person who would do that. Like, does she think I'm a grifter? What is she afraid of? But you know what? I don't know. All I know is I can't use any of my stuff ethically anymore because she has changed the circumstances of our agreements without dialogue, okay, so this is where we are, calling up justice community. So I've shared this gigantic, messy story. I am hoping, now I have already reached out to Amanda Browder on multiple occasions, and I am hoping that she will at some point feel safe and good and will reach out to me for a restorative justice exchange. In the meantime, however, she created this circumstance, and I hate it. I hate that she made this the story. I don't like telling bad stories about people in public. Well, I know that I will talk about what a famous person publicly did famously. I'll talk about that, but I don't tell the stories. Almost every single justice project that I have produced has generally had a white person on it who hurt and harmed either me and or somebody else on that project. And generally, we made sure if somebody else was hurt or harmed, we made sure that that was addressed and made good. It wasn't usually done for me, but we never talked about it publicly because we didn't want that to become the narrative of the project. The narrative of the project needed to be kept pure. That said, that's not true. So let's be transparent and do the messy work of actually creating justice. Because the story that I wanted to tell was there was a white girl who grew up in a really racist place and a black girl who grew up in a really racist place, but they grew up to be adults who could work to dismantle racism together. But the story we're telling is it was harder and more complicated than either of them anticipated. And the white girl did something that hurt and harmed the black girl and the project. So this is where we're at. I have contacted Melissa Olto, who originally designed the Justice Quilt website with us. And I will say, she gave us the justice rate, right? So she was mad. She was like, how dare this person dismantle my work? Because she, as a designer, believed in the vision of the Justice Quilt, which was why she was willing to work so dramatically below her rate to help us to manifest that website. It really was like she gave us such a fancy site. It was so much more than we had ever wanted or asked for. It was so gorgeous and fancy. And so she was like, okay, what we're gonna do is I'm letting that go. We don't need that. She's already building the Calling Up Justice website with me. She's been working on it since like a year and a half ago. So we're gonna do a / the Justice Quilt, callingupjustice.com/the Justice Quilt. And on the Justice Quilt page, we're gonna have a map of the United States. You're going to be able to click on a state, and then you're going to be able to listen to the voices of the people advocating for justice, or the art objects that were offered from that community around justice. So we have a vision for the digital Justice Quilt, what that's going to be like, and just great gratitude to all of the artists and colleagues that we've been working with to help manifest that vision. Great gratitude to Melissa Olto for being willing to construct it and build it with us, but also great gratitude for Melissa helping us with the project of completely rebranding the project. Because even if Amanda comes back to me and says, I changed my mind, you can use it, it's too late. all of those visual artistic artifacts now carry this baggage. And at this point, I know I can't feel good about using anything that she has helped to co-create, because she's created the circumstances of anything that she's invested in being something that is dangerous and unstable and complicated to use. So we can't use any of the video that we took in San Francisco. We can't use any of the photographs that we took in San Francisco of the interviews and the beta testing of the sewing circles in New York, and we can't use any of the footage that we took for the documentary, and we can't use any of the we can't use any of the promotional materials. So I'm repeating myself. We're rebranding. This urgent request is, we are fundraising a discreet $2,000. The Justice Quilt new website will be officially launched in October of 2020, on the anniversary of the week of the Tree of Life shooting. And the rest of that horrible white nationalist violence that happened that week. And we will be continuing to produce story circles, and we're continuing to go strong. And I gotta say, I felt really nervous when I was making this. I continue to. I am hoping that Amanda is absorbing this as an act of transparency. And I also hope that I'm not misconstruing anything that took place. This was my attempt to tell the story plainly. I look forward to her reaching out to us to begin the process of restorative justice, transformative justice. And I look forward to you, calling of justice community, investing in the Justice Quilt. Thank you for hearing my complicated story.